no one is saying that the armies are going to be superseded by an EU army. I mean, who knows, in 100 years' time, maybe, right?
Myös, että moraalisesti EU:n kannattaa ja tulee puuttua myös muihin tilanteisiin, missä EU voi suojella rauhaa ja ihmisoikeuksia.
If the EU wants to claim that it is a so-called normative power that is actually spreading the rule of law, democracy, human rights at the global level, you could argue that it has to intervene to do so.
It very much depends on the type of the conflict, what's going on exactly, and what is the set of tools that is available for the EU. Of course, diplomacy is one of the most frequently cited, and probably the sad fact about diplomacy in terms of communicating our diplomatic achievements is that if diplomacy is successful, people rarely notice. Because if we succeed with diplomatic resolution of the conflict doesn't happen, and nobody gives credit to diplomacy.
There is a fine line between intrusion and responsibility in the sense that we shouldn't forget that many EU member states, especially from Western Europe, used to be colonial powers, and there is a perception in other parts of the world that sometimes the EU, some Western European countries may be acting in a neo-colonial way. As long as the European Union explains the reasons why it wants to intervene in a particular conflict, the political door, so to speak, is open for the EU to be able to intervene. And I think this is key, that the EU should try to consult with the parties that are involved in a conflict to see whether it is welcome or not.
The EU openly says that it supports the democratic development in the world, but it does so in a very peaceful and rather beneficial means. What the EU often does, and it's pretty open and transparent about it, is, for example, it supports the educational projects in the countries in question, or it supports the development of businesses or infrastructure or civil society. But of course, there are sometimes situations when this is not enough, and when this is simply not a way how the conflict can be handled. And then the EU tries to escalate. But usually the EU does it in a pretty clear-cut situation.
Suoraa puuttumista, vaan enemmänkin oman tontin korjaamista. EUlla esimerkiksi on tosi paljon haasteita vaikka siinä, että me viedään aseita konfliktialueille, diktaattoreille, terroristeille väärin käsiin monella tavalla, ja sen takia mä itsekin olen tehnyt tällaisen lakiesityksen siitä, että tämmöistä asevientiä tai tällainen asevienti lopetettaisiin EU:ssa.
In terms of the justification, I think that it is absolutely justified if the EU is trying to, for example, impose sanctions when there are mass violations of the human rights that go to the degree that a significant number of people is getting killed as a result of the tensions within the country. Also, the interventions are justified, and again, we're talking about sanctions, if a country in question creates significant disturbances in the region in terms of undermining the security situation.
Tämänhetkinen Israel-Palestiina-tilanne ja palestiinalaisten ihmisoikeudet niin on asia, mihin mun mielestä EU pitäisi puuttua talouspakotteilla ja sillä, että me ei tuotaisi sellaisia tuotteita, mitkä on niin kuin tuotettu palestiinalaisia sortamalla.
I think there are three main scenarios under which the European Union should intervene. I think when there are human rights abuses, the EU should really think about intervention. Of course, it has done it on many occasions because it can done it through many different tools. Secondly, there is the potential for intervention when we see migration issues, migration crisis. And when you have the focus on human security, well, migrants are among the most vulnerable people there could be in the world, right? So it would make sense for the European Union to try to intervene, to alleviate the situation of these migrants. And thirdly, there is instances of post-conflict reconstruction, right? And we have seen the European Union willing to intervene in the past, for example, in South Asia and Southeast Asia, in helping countries that have gone through a civil war, for example, should transition to a more stable environment.
EUn ensisijainen juttu on se, että meidän pitäisi lopettaa ristiriitaisuudet meidän omassa toiminnassa, ja siitä just tämä asevienti on vaikkapa hyvä esimerkki.
The EU should be focusing more on developing capabilities. I think the export of norms has proved not to work.
Of course, in the longer run, exporting the norms is the best solution for everybody. But this is a very long-term process, and this is the process with a rather open end. You can never be sure that it will work, but we live in a world where this does not always happen. So the EU has to also develop its capacities to respond in other ways. Also because other countries, especially the ones who can wield more power, they don't think that much about restraining themselves from imposing their will, be it by terms of economic coercion or by military power.
Mitä vähemmän meillä on yhteistyötä, sitä enemmän valtioiden täytyy lisätä sitä omaa sotilaallista valmiuttaan, mikä tulee myös kalliimmaksi kuin asioiden tekeminen yhdessä. Et kannatan kyllä niinku sellaista lähtökohtaa.
I increasingly think that in many cases the EU will need it. I'm not talking here about some large-scale operation, but sometimes some limited military force might be needed either to immediately ensure stability, especially in the neighboring countries of the European Union, or, for example, ensure the safety of evacuation of people from a given region.
This doesn't mean that national armies are going to disappear. No one is talking about it. No one is even saying that an EU army is going to become more important than national armies, especially for those countries that have a stronger military capabilities, right? If you think about France, for example, if you think about the Netherlands, for example, no one is saying that the armies are going to be superseded by an EU army. I mean, who knows, in 100 years' time, maybe, right? But in the short-term, mid-term future, clearly this is not going to happen.